But all right, guys, without further ado, I want to bring our first guest of the day with us on to the... There it is, our special guest video. Snehal Patel, CEO, Greenwich LifeSciences. Thanks for joining the Power Hour. Awesome to have you here.
Same here. Very nice to be here.
Absolutely. And how are things in your world today?
Very good. We're very excited to be able to talk to you and tell you about our story. Awesome.
All right, guys. So again, Greenwich LifeSciences, that's the company ticker. You have it there on the screen. GLSI. That's what we're going to be talking about. But Snehal, could you get us started and just give us a little bit of background on the company, and we'll go from there.
Sure. We did our IPO in September and then did a follow-on in December. So we've raised about $36 million this year, last year and into this year. So we're very bullish about our peptide. It's called GP2. It's part of the protein that is expressed in breast cancer patients. 75% of breast cancer patients express this protein. And we have a way to inject this peptide in your skin, in between your skin layers, and you get an immune response. So after a person has surgery, they get a product called Herceptin, and Herceptin helps to reduce the recurrence rate in half. And then we start our treatment after Herceptin treatment is finished, and we have shown that we are able to reduce the recurrence rate by another 50% to bring it down to zero. We've tracked these patients over 5 years, and over 5 years, their cancer hasn't come back. They have to get their first 6 vaccinations, and then they're fully protected. And so this is our phase 2 data that we announced in December. And now we're planning to start a phase 3 trial. We've got the manufacturing of the drug finished last fall, and hopefully in the next month, we're going to be able to put the drug into vials. Those vials will be the final vials that are shipped to the clinical sites. And then at the clinical sites, the clinicians at a handful of sites we'll start with will be ready to start treating patients in our phase 3 trial. And we expect all of this to happen sometime during the middle of this year to the end of this year. Everything will come together and we'll start enrolling our first patients.
Okay. And so let me try to recap and make sure I understand the story and correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, a patient gets treated, and then after they undergo their treatment, that's where you guys come in and you lower the recurrence rate of them, getting cancer again or ailment, et cetera.
Right. Unfortunately, the first alternative is surgery. So you have to remove the tumor, and usually you remove the breast. And then there's a wonderful antibody called Herceptin that has been very effective. It's been around for a long time. And many folks have probably heard of it. And you give that for a year, and you still have a 10%, 15% chance of the breast cancer coming back in some of these really patients that were sick before, even though the tumor's gone. And the breast cancer can come back. They're waiting 5 years. They're hoping it doesn't come back. But it does, for 10, 15% of the time. So our product stops it from coming back in combination with Herceptin. So it's really a combination of 3 things. It's the surgery, the Herceptin, and our product.
Okay. And then in terms of timeline, you said later this year is when commercial product will start shipping out to patients. Is that right?
No, the clinical product will be shipping out to clinical sites so we can start our phase 3 trial. So we announced our phase 2 trial data in December. And we're announcing in April more data about the immune response, which is how the immune system reacted to our treatment. And then we'll probably announce later this year safety data. And between those 3, the recurrence rate, the immune response, and the safety, you have the full set of data. And this year we'll start the phase 3 trial, which will still take some time. It'll take probably till 2024 till we get the readout from that trial. It'll be an interim analysis. This is all lingo in our industry, but in the end, when you get the data that reads out, you can file to market the drug. So your question is, when would we actually have commercial sales? And that would be in around 2024 or later.
Okay. And when you say you get the data, then you can file the drug, is that the new drug application?
Yes, that would be a biological application to the FDA for marketing approval. And if we're successful, you'd get to start marketing it. You'd still continue the trial to make sure patients still don't have the breast cancer come back. But because you had such good results up until the midpoint, so to speak, the FDA lets you market it.
All right. And we have some major fans in the chat. I'm reading the comments as you're talking. And we got people saying, hey, they're familiar with the product and it works wonders. You got people saying that they love the stock and they're in the stock for the long term. So that's great. But could you tell us a little bit about market size and opportunity?
Yeah, so the breast cancer market is very large. There's about 3 million current survivors of breast cancer. And we expect even just for the first narrow indication we'll have 17,000 new patients per year that will get treated. We'll save 1,000 to 2,000 lives per year. So the breast cancer is the largest cancer, and the people that express this protein that we're targeting are about 25% of that market. So it's 25% of a very big market. Our market will be similar to that of Herceptin's because we work with them. So we'll start up with maybe half of their size, but then we'll continue to grow as we expand to other patient populations. And this protein is expressed in other cancers also. So there's a chance we can try our product with some of the other therapies you can mix with it in the other cancers that express this HER2 protein.
Awesome. So it's not only, this market, which is obviously where the focus is, but potentially getting into to treat other cancers as well.
Exactly. And we have really good technology to identify those patients. So Genentech did an awesome job with the HER2 diagnostic technology. So you've got now second, third generation technology to identify those patients. So it's really this Herceptin was one of the best and most famous biotech products to come out, and we're just following in their footsteps.
Awesome. And we got a couple folks in the chat are asking about partnerships. Okay. So I'd be curious to hear how you're thinking about potential future partnerships. What would make a partner compelling for you guys, et cetera.
Well, we have started that process about a couple of years ago because for us, one of our funding opportunities was to do a partnership. And when you're going to a partner saying we haven't started the trial, we haven't published our 5-year data, which we'll talk about shortly. When you don't have any of those things, you're not in a negotiating position of strength. What's happened since is soon we'll start the trial. We've now published the final 5-year data for the phase 2 trial, and we raised $36 million in cash, which gives us about $31 million today. So we have enough cash to get to the end of this interim analysis and get the licensing application from the FDA. If we don't want to raise more capital, we don't have to. So we're going to start to see the licensing transaction dynamics change. We'll see people coming to us wondering if they're not going to do something soon that they may miss out. And that will just change our leverage and our negotiating strategy. And we don't even need to do anything until after we have the data. So we can maximize our return by holding out longer if we needed to. Now, a lot of people like to see you do the licensing transaction as soon as you can, but the sooner you do it, the lower the terms. And we'd like to get as much as we can up front for the company. And then sometimes this morphs into an acquisition. Someone wants to license it, they're paying you enough up front, it becomes an acquisition.
Yeah, that's great. And then you said that the cash on the balance sheet, the $31 million, that will get you through the study.
Yeah, so we haven't reported our 10K, but if you added all the numbers up, the 36 million, subtract the fees to bankers and lawyers, you have about 32 million. And we started with a very low burn rate. Before the IPO, we had virtually no burn rate, and burn rate's still very low when we start the trial.
How is that? Can you explain that to me?
Before the IPO, the management team didn't pay themselves any cash. We're the ones we own up to 75 to 80% of the company. And that's because going up into the IPO, we put our own money into it and we didn't take cash. So we have a real clean structure, and we're just going to build the infrastructure we need to do this trial. We're not going to have a lot of headcount, and that's going to make this $31 million applied strictly to the trial and to the manufacturing, which is almost finished. So with the manufacturing finished, we're already ready to just focus on the trial.
That's great. And I want to dig in a little bit to what you're talking about, the management team, because that seems like a really cool story right there. Had you all worked together previously? How did that come about?
Well, a lot of us are from the Houston area. We've known each other for a long time. So we're partners in investment, partners in how to do this. Joe Dougherty is our chief medical officer. He's been around the industry for a long time. He had his own biotech company. David McWilliams is our chairman. He's the chairman of Bio Houston in Houston. He knows the whole space. He's been CEO of 5 companies, 3 of them public. And then Jay Thompson, who we announced joined our company full-time this past Monday. And if you start to look at our stock price, you'll see what happened that day. She's an expert in running clinical trials and in interfacing with the FDA. She's run over 200 trials, been involved with so many FDA approvals and communications that she's going to take the cash we have and deploy it as efficiently as possible.
Okay. Yeah, and you mentioned, the Monday stock price on that news. I mean, crazy, right? I mean, 100% move there, super volatile trading. And if we zoom it further out, we have this collection of days right here, right in December. Yeah. So I'm curious from like a management standpoint, how you guys think about days when the stock is, I mean, it went from 5 to 150. Right. I guess what goes on those days, because they're sort of surreal moves. Yeah,
I mean, basically we're on the phone with our attorneys and with our bankers, and we're just talking about what we're going to do next. Is this an opportunity to raise capital? And this is when the price moved up a little bit, and then you're just shocked. You just can't believe it went from 5 to 150 in one day. It came back down to 50 or 60 that day, but then it went back up to 100 the next day. And it was just an overwhelming response. And soon we started to get a lot of people contacting us in our inbox, doctors and patients. And that's where you really get impacted, because you're hearing personally from patients who've been affected, who want to get in on the trial. They just see the news and they don't read anymore, so they don't know that the trial hasn't even started, and they're asking how to be involved in the trial. So it's very emotional too.
Yeah,
it's been a very emotional experience for all of us.
I would absolutely believe it. And then can you talk us through, I know we mentioned it, but could you just talk us through a little bit more deeply about the data that came out here? What does it mean? What does it inform for the future, et cetera?
So we put out a poster on December 9th at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Conference. I think your colleagues have one. If they put it up, it's an overview.
Can we get that up, Producer Rohan? There it is.
Very good. So that's a very complicated thing to look at on television, but if you focus on the chart in the middle, that's what got people excited. That's it's called a Kaplan-Meier curve. And what it does is it compares the treated group to the placebo group. The table on the right, so we can zoom in on the table on the right, and that's hard to see too, but what happens there is you show people that both the treated arm and the placebo arm are well balanced. So you then go to the chart, which is the one that was in the center, and that will pop up there. So there you then start to say, okay, well, that means that there's no bias in the trial, and the data that you see is actually something that you could rely on if you go forward in the next trial. So what this top line shows, it's flat, is 100% disease-free survival, which means we had no recurrences over a full 5 years of treatment. And the 5 years means the median of all the patients together is 5 years. Some were 4, some were 6 or 7. The red line below it is the placebo curve, and that's about an 89% disease-free survival or 11% recurrence rate. So 11% of the patients did have their breast cancer come back, and it's metastatic when it comes back. It can be deadly. 80% of metastatic breast cancer patients don't survive, and the 20 that do survive are on drugs for a long time. So that curve is what was shown on that day. It took a little bit of time, but as soon as people saw it, they got very excited about the company and the stock.
Yeah, and in short, again, sorry, I'm the guy I'm known on the show for slowing everybody down, but that's what I do, just to make sure I understand it. Everybody out there watching understands it, but basically, in short, it shows that patients who are on the placebo, 7% of them got breast cancer again. Of the patients who are on your treatment, 0%.
Right, 11% got breast cancer again. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Absolutely amazing.
And that was over 5 years. So our goal is just to reproduce that in the phase 3 trial. we're not going to increase the size of the population or do anything crazy. We're just going to do exactly what conservative people would do who have something that they just want to reproduce. That's all we're doing. And that's why the hire on Monday, Jay Thompson, is going to make sure we don't do that. We're just going to make sure that we do exactly what we did in the phase 2 trial so we get the same result.
Amazing. And then the next date that we have to watch out for is in April, correct?
Correct. So that data I just talked about tells you the top line result, which is the clinical outcome. But when you vaccinate somebody and you give them this peptide, you can measure if they get an immune response. You can measure it many ways. So there's a lot of data behind how each patient responded to the drug they got. And that would be in the treated arm as well as those in the placebo arm who got a placebo. So we're going to see a lot of that data in April at the American Association of Cancer Research conference. So that's one of the largest research conferences in the year in our cancer industry. So we'll be publishing data. There'll be an abstract on April 9th and then a poster on April 10th, which will discuss this information. The immune response is kind of the mechanism of action. It explains how the drug works. And you'd want to see it working in parallel to the clinical outcome. And then you have the complete story.
Awesome. And I want to take one more question out of the chat. So somebody's asking if age matters. If patients respond differently based on age.
Well, we didn't have any patient recur. Okay. So one of the unfortunate things is we can't.
But was there a specific age range that you targeted, or?
Yeah. So it was probably from 18 up to 60 or so. So it's pretty much the entire range. We didn't exclude anyone.
Okay.
So yeah, there's no age range restriction.
Awesome. And then I'll let you go in a minute here. But anything else we should be thinking about, we should be talking about, et cetera?
No, other than, MD Anderson led the phase 2 trial. We're working with Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, which is an excellent teaching institute, to lead the phase 3 trial. So if there are any patients that are interested, please be patient till we start the trial, and then talk to your doctor and ask your doctor if you're eligible, and then they know how to contact the clinicians who will be running the trial. So just a shout out to all the investors and all the patients who responded to our data. You've touched us, so we're going to do the best thing we can to stick with this all the way through and see if we can reproduce our phase 2 trial data.
Awesome, Snehal. Well, thank you so much for joining the Power Hour. Again,
Sure.
I mean, we got so many positive comments in the chat. Everybody's saying I'm either in this one or I'm about to get in it. I love the fact that you and the management team own so much of the company. You paid yourselves with stock rather than cash to get this thing going. A really amazing story, really promising data. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We're very excited. Thank you.
Awesome.